Hi there, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this video interview. And today we're speaking with a very interesting young fellow named Douglas Quinby, who is one of the co-founders of the Arival Conference, the in-destination event. So first and foremost, Douglas, thank you so much for making the time today.
Hey, Kelsey, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, so why don't, for folks who haven't heard of Arival or maybe haven't come across some of your work with Phocusright before, could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be putting on a conference for tour and activity companies?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I've spent, I think, almost 20 years now in travel and tourism in a variety of capacities. And about the last 10 years or so at a leading travel industry research firm called Phocusright. And did a lot of different things there. But one of the areas of study that I initiated, going back almost 10 years, was this whole sector of tours and activities and events and attractions. I mean, I think even before there was a proper name for tours and activities, we really began to look at it. And it was really spurred by the advent of mobile and how that was changing travel and tourism. And I had this idea that this was really going to change how people find and discover and book and experience the destination and all the things that we do. So we did a lot of research, and one of the things that we found was, well, one is no one had done research on the sector, so it wasn't even really a sector, and no one really knew what it was.
Yeah, and Phocusright, a lot of I imagine the focus early on would be with the big players, flights, hotels. You see certainly huge industries with a lot of money and interest in that kind of data. Is that how Phocusright evolved?
Yeah, so I mean, Phocusright is, and I think in general for most travel and tourism kind of research and media coverage, the focus is on, air, car, and hotel, right? Just the transportation and the accommodation. I mean, globally, it's, it accounts for about 80% of industry revenue. And so like if you guys, whoever's listening, if you get any industry newsletters, like, if you get Skift or Travel Weekly or Focuswire or any of these things, most of it's on hotels, or it's on accommodation, or it's on flights. But we actually found through our work at Phocusright that this sector is the third largest. It's something that every traveler does. I mean, just about. I mean, who takes a trip, like a leisure trip, and doesn't do something?
That's right. Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, it's why people travel, right? Like we don't take a trip to watch cable TV in a hotel room, right? We take a trip because we want to experience the city. We want to see something we wouldn't see at home. We want to eat food that we've never eaten before, and meet incredible people.
And even you think of resorts and hotels. I mean, that's top of the list of things to do. When you get there, even if you are an accommodation provider. You better be pretty clear on what sort of things you can do when you're not just hanging out. Even the places like all-inclusive resorts. I mean, they have to have a sense of your activities, experiences, things that you can do in destination.
Yeah. No, we actually call it. And our tagline for the event a little bit is, we call it the best part of travel, right? Because it really is. It's why people travel. It's what they think about. I bet if anyone were to look at all the photos, right, that they take from their last vacation, the photos there'd be almost no photos of the hotel or the car they rented or the flight they took. Yeah. All the photos are going to be about the sites they saw, the tours they took, the food they ate, the things they did, right?
Yeah, maybe the towel, if they do that fancy towel thing. Okay. There's some impressive swans out there. So, but let's get back to as your journey. So you took some first steps in your team when you were researching. What were some of those initial topics? You mentioned the rise of mobile and mobile bookings. Is that your first kind of forays into researching tour and activities?
Well, actually, our first foray was we just tried to get a sense of how big the market was, right? So how many suppliers are there? How many companies are there in the space? How much do travelers spend on it? What are the different types of things that they do, right? Do they do tours? Do they do attractions? Do they do amusement parks? And how are the products changing? How are their expectations changing? So a lot of it was really big picture, like what's happening in the space. How are they booking, too? And how do they make a decision? Like if you're going to go to New York there's lots of great tour companies in New York. Which tour are you going to do? How are you going to find it? What motivates that traveler to choose, and how can the tour companies get in front of that traveler and convince them to book with them? So that was really the motivation, and we just did more and more of it, and came to realize that, boy, there's like 1 million events for hotels and for airlines. Like if you work at a hotel, you could spend basically every working day going to a different conference, but there's almost nothing for tour and activity and attraction.
Sure. And I can imagine you just listing those questions that you had, how useful that information be to a tour activity company, even no matter your size, having those questions answered about, okay, how are people traveling when they get here? How are they booking? What processes, what websites are they using? All that is incredibly useful and beneficial. And so if people want access to those studies and those research, that research that was done, is that still through Phocusright, or is Arival have a sort of research component to it? How's that evolution happened?
Yeah, so a lot of that work was done through Phocusright, and a lot of it is, so you can go to Phocusright certainly and access that. And we also had done a number of posts. So some of the kind of top line insights are free, and now with Arival, we are expanding our the things that we do to introduce some research and insights that's really specifically geared towards the tour and activity and attraction operator. In fact, we just published our first, I think of it as a mini report. It's pretty small, but it gives some insights to the types of activities and things that travelers are doing this summer. So if activity providers want to get a sense of, what's happening this summer and the things that travelers want to do, they can go to our site and have access to that.
I'll put a link to that little mini report too. I must confess I haven't looked too closely at it myself. So we'll figure out what people are doing this summer. Okay, so great. So we saw this giant void, a Douglas-shaped void in this space in terms of creating and launching a conference. You did that last year. What was that experience like? I mean, you really going from zero to praying nightly that enough people are going to show up, and what was that experience like?
I have to confess, Kelsey, I'm still trying to get the image of a Douglas-shaped void out of my head. So I have to imagine what my wife thinks that would look like. So, I just thought, boy, there's no event that really brings this community together, but also provides content insights that's directly relevant to them. So one of the things that I saw quite a bit when I did go to travel industry conferences, and if they did have a session on tours and activities or attractions, it would really, frankly, they were kind of left with table scraps. So it would, the tour and activity folks would be sent to the windowless conference room at the end of the hall, and they'd get some pre-digested hotel marketing thing. But the fact is that how travelers think about tours and activities and attractions, it's very different. Like the hotel and the air, it's a big revenue, or it's a big piece of the total spend for a trip. And travelers tend to book that far out in advance, whereas some tours and activities are booked in advance. Some are really decided in destination. Some travelers don't even know or aren't even aware of until they get there. So the whole approach to engaging with the traveler and serving them and corralling them within the path to purchase is very different. And so we just felt that this category needed something different. So we started this thing. Honestly, we thought it would work. We knew there was a need. Honestly, we didn't know if people would come. Because there really hadn't been something for them to come to. And so we planned, well, if we could we built out the business plan, and we thought if we got about 250 people there, we wouldn't lose too much money, and it would be a proof case for us to go forward. And we were blown away. We had more than 550 people attend. We were kind of scrambling at the last at the last minute to kind of move lunches around so that we'd have enough room, and change the layout of the conference space so that the workshop spaces would be big enough and we had enough food for everybody. But I think everyone ended up having a great time, and we got great feedback from attendees, and just a demand for more. So that's our plan in 2018. We've moved to a bigger hotel and a bigger space, and we're expecting to have many more attendees and a bigger program with 3 days of content and workshops.
You added an entire new day, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. So we've gone from basically 2 days to 2.5 or 3. Mm-hmm. And yeah, lots of stuff going on. And some of the biggest brands, but also I think what's really important too is, and what inspires me the most, honestly, is how many amazing small businesses there are that are doing really creative and unique things, and how committed they are to that specific experience. They're passionate about food in a particular city and the culture in a particular city. And so they're going to deliver, they're just so focused on that. So for example, we have a small food tour operator who's giving a talk at Arival, Akila McConnell of Atlanta Food Walks, who is basically a sole proprietor and is going to talk about kind of what she does and the importance of story and history in her business. And we also have a vice president of brand marketing for SeaWorld, so at the totally other end of the spectrum, and he's going to talk about basically PR crises and kind of managing your reputation. And how does a company like this incredible brand of SeaWorld, how have they been navigating this incredible public relations challenge that they've had over the past couple of years? So these are lessons I think that can apply to all sectors of our industry and to all company sizes, large or small.
Yeah, so that's what I'd love to kind of transition into. I'll just echo my experience at the conference last year was wonderful down in Las Vegas. It's just amazing that we have lots of online connectivity in this day and age, but just being in the same room with a whole lot of other people, many of whom are doing the same sort of things that you are doing, have similar challenges, similar frustrations. Yeah. Those conversations, the networking, and some just incredible workshops and sessions too, make for a pretty invaluable experience. So hats off, and here's to continued success. That's the plan. Is we're going to carry on every single year. But let's shift the conversation a little bit to for the folks who are listening, the tour and activity operators, folks who maybe are sole proprietors and are looking at building up something around their passion rather. What were some of the biggest sort of takeaways or insights that you had from last year's event? If getting all those people in the room, and again, a really diverse group of people, if nothing else, coming away from that conference, you realize that an in-destination event, as you've alluded to, is a really diverse group. What were some of your biggest, so let's say, things that surprised you?
I say more than a surprise. I'd say I was really kind of inspired by the intense, kind of passion of the audience, and the level of engagement around the topic. So, what's kind of interesting. So, at say some bigger, travel industry conferences where you got all the big companies, the big brands, and you've got kind of all the senior executives in the audience, and people are cautious about what they say. Like they don't want to ruffle feathers, or they don't want to if they're just being politically correct, right? And want to and don't want to rock the boat too much, right? Whereas I felt like the audience was so engaged in the topics. So, for example, when we had a speaker from Airbnb talking about their new initiatives with experiences, or we had speakers from Expedia and TripAdvisor, and we had no end of audience questions.
And I remember that session too. There were and heated questions too, asking questions of hey, I run a fantastic food tour in San Francisco or Toronto, Vancouver, wherever.
Yeah.
Can I use your platform? Are you going to be opening this up wider, or are you you're forcing a recruitment of entirely brand new tour leaders, essentially? Who can play is the big question.
Yeah. 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 And I think operators today, they're struggling with, with so many questions, some of the policy changes of TripAdvisor, right? Like they've gone to to a 24-hour cancellation window for most of their operators, right? There's been different changes to their algorithm. They've removed the URL
The
to the
URL is the
websites
big one.
for a lot of the company listings because they want to drive more bookings. So, and these things have a real impact on all of you. I mean, on all of the companies that attend, and they want to know, like, what's going on? Why are you doing this? What are my options? How can
Yeah.
what does this mean for me strategically, right? Like, do I still send my customers to post reviews on TripAdvisor? Maybe I should send them some. So those are all of the things that we're gonna discuss. I mean, we're not there to just kind of play around and have people, pussyfoot on stage. We want to talk about the sector and what it means to all of the companies that are creating experiences.
Yeah, and force a company like TripAdvisor, who is obviously with the monetization strategy, who is essentially by removing those URLs is really creating a scenario that, hey, this really isn't to the advantage of a lot of the people who are going to be in the room.
Yep.
We kind of have to come with terms with that. I mean, not like TripAdvisor owes you a free lunch. They obviously put a lot of effort into building just an enormous site that people use and trust. Yeah, but at the same token, that'll be an interesting topic, I think, this year. I experienced no end of communications of people frustrated with that being removed from TripAdvisor. And your experience in that hotel sector too. This is a move that they had done in that space as well, and it sort of became normal. But I think this is the first time it really impacted a lot of smaller players with these tours and activities. That this was a thing that you could suddenly do. That main driver of traffic to your bookings or to your website is suddenly gone. That's a really frustrating experience. And the questions thereafter aren't so much whine about it. I mean, they're going to be doing what they're doing, but the questions that you're asking, but okay, what's this new environment? The same way that Facebook changes their algorithm, so it's essentially pay to play. It's like, yeah, you can reach people on Facebook, but now you're going to more or less pay for the privilege as a business. You just have to adapt and grow. Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the online booking software, as well as somebody who's you do have this great vision of the field. We saw lots of well, here's my 2 cents on it. We've got lots of really great companies who are working in this space.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be what is clearly growing. Maybe you should share, if you have it offhand, that the percentage of tour and activity operators that are using booking software still remains shockingly low. I mean, I think this is, do you remember what it is offhand or ballpark? But it's low percentages, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's actually grown quite a bit. So we did kind of 2 big supplier surveys when I was at Phocusright, one in 2011 and then one in 2016. And the growth, it had gone from about 1 in 5 to almost 2 in 3, which is really, really great to see. It's been
has grown.
Yeah,
great,
it's been but now I would say though, just as a caution, that our sample size tends to skew towards larger tour companies. So probably if we had, I think there's a long tail of smaller operators, and especially if you're really an individual tour guide and you're kind of doing this. As a very kind of small business, or even as a kind of a part-time kind of side occupation, you might not be using one. So probably the 60% number is a little bit overstated. But I actually think, while all of the attention in our industry has been around like the growth of TripAdvisor and kind of the online travel agency, companies that are selling tours and activities, and some companies that have raised tons of money from venture capitalists. I actually think the most important trend in this sector is what I kind of call the plumbing effect, which is the introduction of very affordable, very accessible web-based software, so that companies really of any size now they can manage their tours, their schedules, they can manage their customer reservations and bookings. All of those processes are automated, so you're kind of moving off of email and Excel and into, a system that can manage everything and keep a full, chart of all of those just basic small business tools, and then also facilitate online booking and distribution is really important. And these are things that happened like in airlines 50 years ago and in hotels 30 to 40 years ago. And then in like in vacation rentals with the likes of HomeAway and Airbnb 10 years ago. So now it's happening to our sector, and it's driving a lot of the future, a lot of the growth. So I think it's huge.
Yeah,
I mean,
I imagine that is going to change quickly too, because what happens is when you've experienced a booking platform like HomeAway and something like Google Flights or Expedia, that you almost have a demand for it, and especially as I don't know, a younger person will say, navigating in the world. If I'm going to book a tour activity business, you're almost shocked sometimes. You go to a website and you have to phone somebody. I mean, what do you mean? You don't have real-time availability? I can't book right there and then. I think the expectation is going to be really high. And I think you hit it on the head that there are tons of affordable options. In our online tourism academy and the programs, I absolutely encourage the use of online booking software. Distribution is one thing, which we can talk about here in a moment. But the other big thing is just the amount of time that it can really save you. Like you mentioned, the day-to-day. And then three, which the customer experience, which is what I'm all about and celebrate and sing all day from noon till from noon. Yeah, I sleep in a little bit, but from the start of the day till the end of the day, is you can use an online booking software to automate really wonderful customer experiences. You can have touch points. There are touch points with any booking experience where they come to your website with maybe. With a booking software, of course, they do bookings. So you're going to send them a confirmation email, a receipt. Then you've got maybe a reminder. Then you've got a follow-up. Those become automated with your booking software, and you can tweak and optimize them to provide sort of wow and delight them along the way. And we spent a lot of time talking about how you can create little PDFs or like a little map of your favorite coffee shops in town, or something to do with your gateway city, or great little hikes or walks that you could experience in the area. And you could put that into a booking software, so every one of your customers is getting it without you having to do anything. It's just there. And my gosh, that's pretty powerful when you start thinking about scaling. Anytime you can leverage,
it's almost like a price of entry. Like, I think if you're not doing it, today, or don't have near-term plans to do it, your competitor, down the street is going to do it, and you're gonna be at a material disadvantage if you do. So I agree completely. In fact, one of the key inspirations for Arival, as with your tourism academy, is there's no place or had been no place for all of the operators to come together and just meet all the companies, check out the software. And so we set up this one aspect of the event, which we call Demo Labs, which allows, you can go in and you can see, okay, here's what it's like to set up a product in Peak. Here's what it's like to set up a product in Resgo, in Fair Harbor. We're not going to get in the business of saying, oh, use this one or that one. I mean, that's all for, and I likewise, I'm sure you as well. But it's where you can go and see everything and get a feel, because every business is different. Have your own needs, and the software systems are different, and some are better for certain things than for others. So really important for you to go and get a feel for what it's like.
It's awesome, and those demo labs are great. And I think the companies are sophisticated enough that these aren't high pressure situations. I mean, you can't have a high pressure situation at a conference. They just turn around and walk over to your competitor. So it is a really wonderful experience. Quickly, what are your thoughts here? We've obviously had some movement, some acquisitions of Boken by TripAdvisor, and then acquisition of Fair Harbor. How do you see that shifting those offerings? And do you see them? We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, so we actually put a post out about this on our site. So if anyone wants to go to the Arival site and our Insights blog, and you can look at a couple of posts there on the topic. So honestly, I don't think it really is that big of a deal for, the end user. It's, now that, Booking.com has bought FareHarbor, it's not like FareHarbor is going to, switch off connectivity to TripAdvisor or to Expedia. I mean, I think it's about that does them no good. It does their customers no good. There's some concern about things like that, but I don't think that's, for the end, user, I don't really think it's a big deal. It puts pressure on some of their competitors because now there's bigger pocketbooks, behind those two
shift
companies.
In pricing, like with, I think TripAdvisor basically was just operating at a loss in order to try and ultimately encourage more supply.
More customers. Yeah. So in a way, I think it's good, because it only heats up competition. But at the same time, not too long after, Peak announced that they've raised another significant round of funding. So they're clearly, far from throwing in the towel. They're doubling down, and there's a lot of confidence in the market that a lot of these companies because what's just to keep this in mind, right? So there are at least, and I say at least, 126,000 tour and activity companies around the world. And I believe, and this is based on our projection from the Phocusright study we did, but I believe it's understated because, again, it's really hard in research to capture that long tail of really small operators, especially in emerging markets. So I'm sure, so I say at least.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of companies. We're talking about
especially private tour guides too, that are essentially running a private small enterprise.
Exactly.
But how many private tour guides are there per city around the world? Yeah.
And when you think about things like Airbnb Experiences with individuals kind of becoming guides in a way, then so I think it's probably a multiple of that number. So it's a huge market. We're really at the beginning. So there's lots of opportunity for lots of different tech. So I think it's good, and it's just going to make things more interesting.
More interesting. I think that these large tech companies have gotten a real free ride in terms of public opinion here. I'm grouping in there Facebook and Google and the Don't Be Evil crowd and the large players in travel, the Expedias and the Booking. You gotta
they're not like they get a free ride at Arival. That's why.
That's right. Not at Arival. I continue to be interested. This is my thing that Okay, so let's say I sign up with FareHarbor. Is my whose data is it now, right? Because all of a sudden, Booking has a lot more information about travelers, and they can be targeting people and doing it in really sophisticated, advanced ways with machine learning. And we're just going to see a brave new world of, I think, personalization going forward. That those behemoths are suddenly going to make that distinction between your customers. And again, you could just be talking about in a very local environment, you're using an online booking software to get people in your local area. You're not even using their distribution like Viator or Expedia local. They can still use that information to potentially target them, resell them. So I think one of the things we talk about is we can transition into this topic because I think you've got some great insights here too, but distribution. And so even if right now the online distribution through places like Viator and Expedia and others, depending on the country, there's these massive players, it seems, depending on where your customers are coming from. I just see that number going up and up and up, especially as big data suddenly gets their hands into it. So let's talk a little bit about distribution. Let's start, because we came this route, talking about the OTAs, and obviously booking software is how you can easily sync your product, your availability, your tour times into these larger distribution platforms. Again, I would say one of the surprises that I got out of conference last year and hearing some of the people is again, that number is still pretty small in terms of overall bookings. As I just mentioned, I think that's going up. But what's your take on where it is now and how you see the next 2 or 3 years, and what should be the takeaways for a small tour activity operator or of any size?
Yeah, so I think that this is really important that there's a lot more to this market than just TripAdvisor and Expedia. And if your business is if you've got a lot of your business coming from just a few OTAs, then you're probably missing out on a much bigger pie. So just to give like a little perspective, uh, online travel agencies, and so by that we're talking specifically about those brands that sell tours and activities online, like Expedia, TripAdvisor, Get Your Guide in Europe. There's Klook in Asia. There's a number of others that are kind of smaller to medium sized across around the world. Many
and
of them.
niches too, like amusement for the more of the actual attraction side.
Yeah, there's
Sea Trip is big in China,
Europe.
isn't it?
Sea Trip is huge in China. There's like Clear Trip in India for companies that serve the Indian market. There's Be My Guest, which is more of a B2B type operation
Veltra,
based out of Singapore.
Japanese.
Veltra, Veltra out of Japan. There's Civitatis in Spain. So there's Izango as well. So there's, I mean, and
so if you're listening and you're wondering, hey, where are some potential markets? Or I think we'll maybe get into this. You want to reverse engineer the question, not necessarily that you want to go and bring Chinese people to your small town in rural Nebraska if they're not coming, but you really have to, I think, explore. Hey, are these travelers coming here? And if you want to reach them, feel free to pause this video, go back, look into those distribution platforms, because these are not small organizations.
Yeah, no, they're not, but I think it's really important still to keep in mind that in aggregate, all of the OTAs account for less than 5% of total sales in this market. Now that's going to change.
Yeah,
it's going to change. I mean, it's the fastest growing channel, and they've got the kind of power and technical capability, especially the big ones like Booking.com and TripAdvisor and Expedia and Airbnb. So it's definitely going to change. It's changing already. But I think it's really important to keep in mind, if you look at, still by our calculations at Phocusright, there's still more sold through hotel concierges than there are through OTAs. Now that's probably going to change if it hasn't already within the next kind of year or two. But it's a pretty amazing number. So I think when you think about distribution, the most important thing for any tour and activity and attraction operator is to really understand, their destination. So how many people come to my destination? How do they get there? Where do they come from? What markets? How do they book it? When do they plan? And so if for example, you say in a market like in LA, for example, where you've got, or California, where you've got a lot of inbound travelers from Asia and from China, and you're not getting a big piece of that inbound market, well, maybe you should think about, how do I partner with a company like Sea Trip in China, or or some of the traditional tour operators? I think that's also really important. You have companies like JTB in Japan, or Hana Tours in Korea, or TUI and Thomas Cook in Europe. Traditional kind of large-scale tour operators that send millions, tens of millions of travelers around the world every year. So how do you connect to that marketplace? And so that's one of our missions at Arival. We've got actually a series of talks that are devoted to this. We have a talk by Dan Christian from the Travel Corporation, one of the largest tour companies, to talk about, hey, don't forget, there's more to your market than just Expedia and TripAdvisor. Here's this whole world of travel agencies and tour operators. Where do you start, right? Another really important thing, I think, for tour and activities and attraction operators to keep in mind too is, if you're not working with your local destination marketing organization or DMO, then you're probably, you're missing something, because they're the ones who are responsible for marketing your destination, and they should know. They should have the stats.
They should have information. Yeah, anyone worth their salt. One of the biggest questions about how they can effectively do that would be finding out the questions you just asked. Who's actually coming here? How are they coming? Where are they coming from? How are they booking it? And then the goal is to really, promote the area. How do you see it? One of the things I think the first time I went to the World Travel Market in London, really starting to appreciate that you can have many layers of these. Even a place like Vancouver that might have, the downtown core has a sort of a promotional organization, and the city itself, and then British Columbia, and then Canada. So how would you recommend a small operator to sort of engage with those different levels? Is it just as relevant to go and work with, visit your state level or provincial level, and the national level?
So I think it really depends. Especially if you're a small local operator, you should start local, and you should start small and learn. But it really, you're right. Typically, a city or will have an entity. There might be a county that will have an entity, and then there'll be kind of a national or provincial organization as well. And yes, you're right. There are layers. I would certainly start kind of local and see what kind of information you can get. How do they work with kind of inbound providers of tourists, and where do you start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking to your point too, there you can even get inspiration from seeing who else is in the room. Who is maybe either coming to those meetups or coming to conferences, or even just membership online. The fees are often fairly nominal for the return that you can get from knowing that. I just speak to an example that I know well. Backroads Tours is an active tour, bike and hike trip operator. They're running week-long tours over the world. And my wife Sarah and I, when we got into trip development and really designing these experiences, there are people out there, and we did this job, who are looking for unique, interesting, authentic experiences that will fit into longer itineraries. And I had this experience in France where I was looking at, gosh, there's a lot of people who talk about wine in France, but I'm looking for somebody who's doing it a little bit differently, that's maybe got a little more personality, that likes to, use their hands, wave the baguette around, has got a unique perspective or angle. And again, that's an example of an individual. So when I found that person, went on the tour, got to know them, I was able to book them solid with probably like 30, 35 dates over the course of the summer groups, and that was it. That was just from conversation, by being focused on quality, which is of course back to that message. And if you're here tuning into this call and talking, this is the type of reward that you can reap by really getting serious about creating a memorable and unique experience. Is that there are mid-level operators, and like the Thomas Cooks and the Tuis, that you can connect up with them. Think there are people out in your region right now trying to create great itineraries, and you can be part of those itineraries. And they can be really lucrative long-term contracts. I'm pretty sure that we're still using it. 5 or 6 years later, we're still using that particular wine tour company in France. And that just comes from, it goes to show that the networking there can be really invaluable.
Yeah, a lot of the destination marketing organizations will provide basically kind of buyer-seller exchanges. So these are basically meetups and places where some of these, we call them inbound operators, can meet the ground tour and attraction companies, and in a sense, kind of contract and build partnerships together. So at the kind of the largest scale, you've got entities or events like ITB in Berlin. There's IPW in the United States, which is another really big one. But lots of kind of regional and smaller city level DMOs also provide networking events and meetups where you can connect. So if there's a small, we'll call it like an inbound operator that might sell lots of tours to a big tour operator like a TUI or Thomas Cook, but you could be a supplier to that inbound operator. I mean, there's lots of different layers, I guess, as you said, and lots of opportunities. But I think it's really important for any kind of ground operator in a destination to really networking with your local destination marketing organization and the other suppliers in the room is invaluable, because you also learn what they're doing, right, and what they've learned, and they can give you guidance and tips and things. Well, don't waste your time with this group, because but work with these guys. No, really, like that's. Yeah, and I see it, in the Facebook group, Kelsey, that you and Matt Newton, that you guys moderate. We see these questions come up all the time. Hey, have you heard of this new website that they're trying to because they're constantly getting inbound calls. Hey, they want me to list my tours. Have you heard of these guys? Have you heard of this guy? So that's important. It's who pays their bills, right? Who's going to represent the product well? Who's going to deliver the kinds of customers that are really right for my product? I think all of those things are really important.
Yeah, and I think as the long tail, as we've been saying, but if you are that small tour and activity operator, it can be a bit of a shock sometime when you start encountering the commission, or essential slice of your business that goes to inbound operators, that goes to online travel agents.
OTAs, yeah.
And I think it needs to be a little bit of a shift in thinking of just how valuable what they are providing is, or the notion that people who say, 20%, gosh, that's a huge cut. I think it needs to be a shift in thinking. Even if right now most of your business isn't coming through those channels, you want to set yourself up to be able to price your tour in such a way that you've got 20% plus, some space for, make sure you've got your cut for yourself, and pricing in such a way that you can take advantage of those channels, or again, an operator that can come to you.
This whole issue with, OTAs and commissions and so forth, and the issues that I think tour and activity operators are really beginning to struggle with, just so they know, and you all know, like, this is not new. You're not going through this for the first time. This has been an issue that has dogged the rest of the travel industry, especially hotels, for many years. There have been lawsuits and all sorts of things going on. So one is, you're not alone, but I think there are a lot of smart people who are looking at some of these early developments in this market and saying, hey, let's not take the same approach that the hotels have done, which, and it's happened in the hotel industry, where it's really become adversarial. Like, how can this marketplace, work together? Look, I think on the one hand, and I also want to, as we talked about kind of TripAdvisor, an example earlier in the call too, when we talked about some of the changes and how we're going to ask the tough questions at Arival, like, I also want to be clear, like, we're not out to play sides, or to, it's not about putting somebody on the spot, or, but it is about addressing the big issues that affect everybody. And look, without a doubt, commissions are important. And as these online travel agencies get bigger, look, they're going to have more leverage to call the shots at the negotiating table. That's, that's going to happen. So but at the same time,
it comes with sophistication and levels of marketing and machine learning and personalization that are going to make for incredible customer experiences, and they'll be your customers.
And how does if you're a small tour operator, how can you find that inbound couple from Germany that would love to do your tour? How would they ever find you? Well, they're going to look on those marketplaces where, they can see all of these options and make the decision that's right for them. The cost for you as an individual tour company to find that traveler can be quite high. So that's the balance. And a big part of it actually is making sure that your operational house is in order, right? So you have to know your costing, your tour costing inside and out, which is why we're thrilled to have Ingrid from Polymath, who's going to do a whole session on actually cost accounting for tour operators at Arival. And we're going to have sessions on pricing too. Like, you got to know your costs inside and out, so then you can figure out, okay, I can accept this type of commission level on this tour. Maybe I list this tour on an OTA, but maybe these tours, maybe I don't, and maybe I save these for other channels. So there's lots of different ways to approach this and to use the different channels.
Yeah, and I think it can be deceiving when you say, the overall number is very small. But I know many small tour and activities operators where the percentage they get through Viator can be as high as 35% of their bookings.
Yeah, in some cases higher. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so if you can develop that into a channel, if it's working for you, and that's great. And of course, there's wisdom in that diversification. That's your main traffic source is from TripAdvisor, and they turn off the taps like they did recently, you need to have some stability built into your system. The other lumbering kind of giant here, and I know you'll be hopefully trying to get Google to the conference, but how do you see Google's role in all this? Because I know, and the whisperings certainly been that they want to make a move into that.
I wouldn't call them lumbering.
Yeah, yeah. See, I'm not the most PC. It's good that you're a host on stage.
Well, they move pretty fast. I think it's pretty amazing. I mean, honestly, it's just. I mean, Google is like the ultimate kind of good guy, bad guy. Like on the one hand, everybody loves to hate them because they're so big and they've become so successful. They're the 800-pound gorilla across multiple industries, right? When you search, mobile, your phones, I mean, maps, I mean, all of this stuff, it's huge.
Yeah.
At the same time, you have to take your hat off and just acknowledge how a company can continue to innovate and grow and create all these new products. And
to see what they did with Google Flights too is for me just over a very short period of time quickly becoming not only convenient, the fact that it pops up and it's there, they get a lot obviously of traffic and use from that, but just in terms of user experience. How many times have you going through various sites, and then they've all been innovating and iterating. But when Google really throws its weight at something, you're looking at something that is oftentimes focused on the user in a way that is can often blow other people out of the water. So what I can quickly imagine is through, like you said, their empire is not exclusively search, right? It does hit maps, it does hit other things, but these little knowledge graphs, the whole notion that Google is going to be showing you information so that you don't have to leave google.com or .ca or whatever. You can get the information you need and maybe even do a booking right from that screen. It seems like, especially I'm hearing all kinds of deals that they're announcing with distribution partners, with booking software to get tours and activities in there. What have you heard?
Yeah, well, there has been some reporting actually. On Phocuswire, they've broken a story about a startup within kind of an experimental kind of incubator within Google called Area 120, which is an interesting focus on tours and activities. So there's been some rumors about that. I think they're working with some of the OTAs. Like it looks like you can see if you do a search on Touring Bird, then you'll get a link to book something on Get Your Guide or one of the other OTAs. But look, certainly, I mean that's kind of experimental, and we don't know. We don't know how serious it's going to be. But certainly the industry pays very close attention because look at what they've done in flights, like you just said. Look at what they've done in hotels and just the power that they have. I mean, Google sits at the top of the funnel for many, many travelers for many, many trips. And that's a very, very powerful position to be. And I have no doubt, I mean, look, we just talked about the data. This is a big market. This is a market that's growing. By the way, it's growing faster than any other segment of travel. People want more and more experiences, and they want different types of stuff. Like we're talking about this millennial generation that is, their parents have already bought them everything, so they're going to spend their money on experiences and things to do. We see it right very clearly, and all of their parents, right, all the baby boomers, they've also bought everything. Who's going to go out and buy more flat screen TVs? No, they want to go have a fabulous wine.
How many
right?
How many times have you go to Provence, into Italy? These hotspots. There's a real expansion too. I think, and people are looking for different experiences too. So let you finish your thought there.
Yeah, well, just so that I have no doubt that Google is going to be very, very engaged in this sector. We haven't confirmed a speaker yet for Arival, but we had Rob Torres who last year at Arival, who is one of the most senior people in the Google Travel organization, and we certainly expect to have some speakers there and expect to have some presence there because they play a very big role, certainly in general search, and we have workshops specifically on search, how tour and activity and traction companies can manage their search campaigns, both for organic and certainly for paid. But maps is very important. A lot of travelers, who travels somewhere and doesn't use a Maps app, right, to figure out where to go and look at recommendations, right? So that's also very important. And then clearly, even if we don't have a clear Google travel product for tours and activities today, like we do for flights, they have a lot of smart people. They follow the market closely. Yeah. They're going to be involved. If there's money to be made in online advertising and connecting travelers to supply, they're going to go after a piece of it, and they're going to do probably a pretty good job, like they've done in every other sector.
Yeah.
So definitely keep an eye on it for sure.
Yeah, it'll be nice to see, TripAdvisor, having to pay Google. Maybe you'll get some satisfaction watching them siphon off profits.
They already pay. They already pay a pretty penny to Google. Everybody does.
Yeah, you pay the old man. The other big one, we're actually together hosting a workshop on online reviews. Google reviews. We're going to talk about it because that is a space where I felt that. I've done just an incredible job in mobilizing people. Whoever designed, I don't know how much you've looked into that, but the local guides and how you get rewards for commenting, they've really found a way to essentially mobilize an army of volunteers that are essentially doing this for free. And I tell you, the last trip that I did to New Zealand, we came back from working, I was using Google Maps to get information on places. I didn't go to TripAdvisor when I needed to get a little bit of information on a tour activity or an attraction or something, because there are now sort of enough volume to show, okay, that information is showing up on maps, of course, that the business loads in, but underneath are the reviews. Oh, when was this a busy time to go? Oh, do they have washrooms? How, even for things like hiking trails and all these in-destination things. And it's a shift that's happening that I think as a tour and activity operator, you need to be aware of, or you can leverage it. I mean, I see even little sneaky moves like people who are taking their Airbnb listings. Hey, I just happen to have an Airbnb listing. I'm going to plunk it in Google Maps, and the amount of traffic that you can get from that by having beautiful pictures of your lakefront little cabin or what have you. You can be doing the same thing with your tour and activity business. Plus,
there's lots of opportunities and free tools and ways for companies to leverage Google beyond simply paying the money for keyword advertising, and even potentially to consider becoming a local guide, right? If you are a small business or local tour guide or tour provider, consider it, look into it, because that's an opportunity to get your name and your service out in front and to become a resource. And there are other marketplaces as well where tour companies can do that. So that's. It's pretty neat
too, because one of the Rotorua was one of the places we went. There's hot springs, and I heard tell that there's the ones you pay for, right? There's the big attractions that you get to pay $30 and you get to sit in the hot springs, and it's a wonderful experience. But then there's the sort of off the grid sort of stuff. And sure enough, there was. This is a kerosene. Was it Kerosene River or Kerosene Springs? There, people described, here's the trail, it's hard to find, Then you walk down and you sit in this like bubbling, perfectly warm stream, all courtesy of these local guides, of people who are leaving reviews. So huge opportunity there. And also be mindful that if you're not doing it, your competition could, and they could be showing up there. Let's as we wrap this up, you've been so generous with your time. The buzzword that we kind of hear a lot is this notion of authenticity, something different, off the beaten path. My gosh, the beaten path is beaten in travel, but that phrase is beaten, right? Everybody and their dog. What do you think is happening there in terms of that shift? Is it real? Is it just sort of a marketing speak? I have some sense of it, but I'd love to get your thought. Is that an actual desire from travelers that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think it's something. My sense is it's something that's really been brought to the fore by the growth of Airbnb as something that they've really kind of leveraged as a point of differentiation for the Airbnb brand and the Airbnb experience. And in fact, I remember when I think it was maybe 2 years ago when we started to see rumors coming out about the launch of their experiences business, and this is maybe in the summer of 2016. And they started to promote these videos. I don't know if you ever saw it. There was the commercial they did of kind of people doing Segway tours through Paris.
Oh, the traditional tours, kind of.
Yes,
they had a string of kind of bulk mass travel sort of tours.
Yeah, right, exactly. So if you look up that commercial, you could probably find it on YouTube, and and they're kind of making fun of Segway tours, and they have this little line that says, don't do Paris, live in Paris, or something like as about experiencing it like a local. And I remember I was at a conference, and I was moderating a session on the sector, and we showed the commercial to the audience, and we had Johannes Reck, one of the co-founders and the CEO of Get Your Guide, and he said, it's a great commercial, but just so you guys all know, Segway tours are one of our biggest sellers, right? So it's a really, I think it's a really interesting thing. I do think it speaks to a really fundamental trend among consumers, which is today's traveler. It's not like 30 years ago. More people than ever have already gone to Europe, right? We've seen the Eiffel Tower. We've gone to the top of the Empire State Building. We've done a lot of these things.
Yeah, those that do travel in this segment of the market. Yeah.
So this population of travelers is more educated, more sophisticated than ever, and so when they go back a second or a third time, they do want to do something a little bit different. They want to. So there is certainly a big segment of the market that is looking for something, for lack of a better word, authentic. But what I would like to say is it's something different, right? So you might be interested in experiencing local food, or maybe local wine, or maybe music, or if it's something that's of interest. So I think actually personal is more important than authentic, because if you don't care about, if you're not a wine drinker, it doesn't matter how authentic the wine tour is, you're not going to want to do it, right? So it's
just like it's so hard to define what it is. I mean, it obviously refers to a sort of a lack of superficiality or disingenuousness, but it's a bit effusive to try and build around it.
But there is a definite. I think there's also there's something real to it, but there's also a marketing spin to it as well. And I could see. And I could certainly see, the tour, if, the small tour company, or a large company for that matter, that has been running tours in a city and has been investing in building a great tour experience and connecting travelers with local shops or local experiences. And then to have a big brand like Airbnb to come along and say, oh, that's not authentic. we only want authentic experiences. I think that's a little bit, disingenuous too. I think and that's one of the things that amazes me. There's so many incredible companies that are offering great experiences, and travelers want both. And we, in fact, in the Summer Pulse, the study that we just released, we could see
people want to see the big sites. The big
they want
draws.
to go to they want to go to Paris. They want to see the Eiffel Tower. They're going to eat a croissant in a cafe, and they may want to go have that really interesting off the beaten path.
You can do all of it.
Do it all on the same trip.
Yeah, and I think that's the takeaway of the whole notion. It's like marketing speak to talk about the USP or the unique value proposition, but what that boils down to is exactly what we're talking about. And we can kind of end with this thought. Gray Line International, the sort of sightseeing tour company, and they franchises around the world. They brought me in as a speaker to their conference last year in Miami, and one of the things that a person shared was that in New York, this was essentially a potential threat or a competitor that was upcoming. Have you heard of the ride?
Yeah, sure.
So in terms of something that's unique or different, the way that this coach tour, we all have seen hop on, hop off, or traditional sightseeing tours. This is one where all of the seats face the side of the bus. It's full glass windows, so you can see. You have some type of narration. I don't know enough about it in terms of it's an individual or person, but the real thing is that it's something unique. And as you go through the city, in this case New York, but I think they're looking to expand, and may have already, is there you've got people who are acting out scenes. Think of actors and plants and this sort of thing who are just embedded into the city. And you've got a very unique way of doing a bus tour. And
but is that authentic?
Well, this is it. It's authentic may not be the right word, but this notion of something that you are going to remember.
Yeah.
I speak a lot in the term something that's memorable, something that is an experience, and that it doesn't just mean ditching all coach tours, because there's always going to be a place for a sightseeing tour. But you can innovate on that tour. You can find unique angles. You can have themes. You can anyway go on and on about that sort of thing. But I think that hunger is there, and especially as we have the baby boomers transitioning out of that travel market, you've got a new and younger generation that I think is much more embracing of places that you can find that in peer-to-peer marketplaces, that eat with, which we hadn't mentioned, the notion that you can go and like eat in somebody's home, stay in somebody's home, hang out with a different local. I mean, if that's your thing, there's a lot of opportunity to do that. Okay, let's wrap things up. What are you most excited for at this year's Arival? And then at the end of this conversation, of course, we'll put a link down that you can check out. We've even arranged a special discount that if you sign up through the Be a Better Guide community, we'll give you a percentage off of the conference. So it'll be a great chance to come hang out with Douglas and I. If you enjoy this type of conversation, these types of things, then it's the place to be. And I got to say, I'm not. Las Vegas isn't a place I wouldn't go, but because Douglas, you and your co-founders are down there, I might be making an annual trip.
Well, it is a fun city. It is a fun city.
Many Canadians go down there. We go visit Celine. There's things to do. We should have her as part of the activities, I'm sure.
And by the way, don't forget, Kelsey, you're doing a workshop on recruiting and training, which is really important, especially it's a really hard issue. Every company has to deal with it, and certainly, for tour companies, how do you find and recruit amazing, inspirational tour leaders? And so I really appreciate you coming and doing that workshop. And you're also going to give a talk in the theater on creating those unforgettable experiences. How do you create tours and memories that last? So I would say that would be definitely on my top, my top 10. The problem is I've got like a top 30 or 40 at Arival.
Yeah.
Honestly, for me, my favorite experience last year, it was just meeting all of the different types of companies, and especially small tour companies, and hearing about the things that are on their mind. I mean, for me, it was a huge learning experience, and it's the conversations that I have with the industry, over a beer at one of the parties or over coffee at one of our networking breaks that, I work hard to build a great conference and great content, but it's making the connections and the learning from them that inspires me the most and gives me ideas for our next insights report for our next conference.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much, Douglas, for taking the time and sharing the insights that you have with all the folks here. We'll put links down below for any of the information that we've mentioned. Take care, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you.